had a good wife, Megan. Beautiful, educated, a former nurse. We had a small house in the suburbs, the kind of quiet life people dream of. And I had my dad, Warren, 79 years old. A man who used to be the definition of strength and integrity in our family. After a lifetime of hard work, hands calloused, back bent, he was fading. End-stage heart failure. The doctor said it wouldn't be long. Instead of putting him in a nursing home, a place I knew would drain the last bit of life from him in silence, Megan offered something I'd always been grateful for. Why don't we let him stay here with us? After all, he's your father. I cried when she said that. Thought I'd married a truly good woman. We turned my home office into a small care room, bought a hospital bed, a breathing machine, hired Arlene, a nurse, to help out 3 days a week. In the beginning, Megan helped too. She'd make his formula, tidy the room, sometimes sit with him and read the paper aloud. I remember those early evenings around the table, Dad sharing stories from the war, Megan listening, actually listening. I thought those moments were simple, ordinary. I didn't realize they were the last time everything still felt whole. Then things started to shift, subtle at first, but I felt it. Megan would frown when I said, "Dad's not doing well. I'm going to skip overtime tonight." She started avoiding his room, said the meds smelled bad. The light in there gave her headaches, little grimaces, heavy sighs, excuses. And then, one day, I installed a small camera in Dad's room. Not because I suspected anything, just to make sure he didn't fall when I was out working in the garage. That afternoon, early in the month, sunlight pouring in soft and golden. I was fixing a shelf out in the garage when my phone buzzed. I opened the app to check in on my dad just to see if he was resting. What I heard instead is something I'll never forget. A whisper, low, venomous, from the lips of the woman who slept beside me every night. "I hope you die soon. Your son's wasting his life on you. You're dragging us all down." I froze in the garage, my heart gripped like a vice. On screen, my father's eyes fluttered open, wet with tears. And then he shut them again. No response, no anger, just silence, like it wasn't the first time he'd heard it. That night, we sat down to dinner, like nothing had happened. Megan made barbecue that night. It used to be Dad's favorite, but there wasn't a plate for him. She said, "He only eats soft food now. Don't worry, I made him porridge." Just a simple sentence. On any other day, I might not have thought twice, but after what I heard that afternoon, it hit different. She still smiled, still served me like always, still asked, "How was work today? Anything funny happen?" All I could hear was her voice from earlier, whispering poison at my father's bedside. I faked a smile, faked small talk, then quietly cleaned up the table alone while she went upstairs to binge Netflix. That night, I lay in bed, back turned to her, gripping my phone like a lifeline, watching that clip again and again, 10 times, maybe more. Not because I didn't hear it, but because I didn't want to believe it. Still, I started watching the older footage, earlier clips from the past week, and what I found was worse than I imagined. One time she walked into Dad's room while he was sleeping, turned on the fan, and aimed it straight at his face. Let's see how royalty likes a cold breeze when all he does is eat and sleep all day. Another time, she slammed a glass of water down on his nightstand so hard it spilled. "Hurry up and drink. The sooner you're gone, the better." And then the last one. She sat on the edge of his bed, adjusted his pillow with a grimace, then let out a deep, exasperated sigh. The kind that made your stomach turn. Like my father's existence was a stain on her perfect life. He didn't say a word. He never did. He just closed his eyes and endured it. At 3 a.m., I got out of bed, walked into the garage, the only place in that house that still felt like mine. I opened the tool chest, installed another camera, one in the living room, one in the kitchen, and one on the bookshelf, where Megan usually sat to call her friends. I started recording everything. On the outside, I was still the same loving husband, still took her shopping, still made her weekend breakfasts, still smiled when her friends dropped by. But inside, I was in a silent war. I opened a private bank account, changed my email passwords, started gathering every legal document I could find. Marriage certificate, deed to the house, insurance policies, and the prenup Megan insisted on before we married. "It's just paperwork, babe. You're the only one I'll ever love." That's what she told me. I also called my brother, Christian, out in Colorado, told him everything. There was a long pause. Then he said, "If you don't divorce her, I'll fly out and do it for you." I told him to relax. I had a plan. Because the truth is, I had loved Megan. Deeply. I truly believed she was my partner, the person who'd never let me carry anything alone. But now, every time I saw her smile sweetly while making tea for my father, all I could see was sickening pretense. And I swore I would not let my father die in the very home he built, under the contempt of a woman who had no heart left in her. The following week, I made myself disappear. Not literally, of course. To Megan, I simply said the company had a sudden project. 3 days out of town, leaving early Saturday, back Monday night. She gave me that supportive wife look and said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of Dad. Just focus on work." I nodded, smiled, kissed her forehead, and then Saturday morning I left the house, only to loop around 2 blocks later and park at Lorraine's place. Lorraine, my father's kind neighbor, who knew everything and had offered her backyard garage for me to stay. From there, I cut across the lawn behind our house to the small shed at the far end of the yard, where I had set up surveillance, a camera covering the living room, the kitchen, my father's bedroom. The shed was dusty, damp, smelled like old wood, but I didn't care. Laptop, headphones, bottled water. I was ready, like a man on a stakeout, watching his target. And then, she showed her true face. Not even 2 hours after I'd left for the trip, Megan walked into my father's room. Arlene, the nurse, had stepped out to pick up supplies. I watched the screen, heart pounding in my chest. Megan stood there, arms crossed, eyes narrowed at the frail man in the bed. Then she said something that made me squeeze the mouse so hard my knuckles cracked. "I count the days till you stop breathing. I want this room. I want you gone." My father didn't answer. He just stared at the ceiling, like a man who had long since accepted that silence was the last defense of someone too tired to fight. I almost burst through that door, but I needed more, and Megan gave it to me. That afternoon she called a friend, giggling. "Finally, I have the whole house to myself. No more listening to that old man wheeze like he's on death's door." That night she drank wine, played music, floated around the house like it belonged to her alone. Then, when Arlene returned, Megan slipped her mask back on, set the table, asked sweetly, "What would Dad like for dinner tonight?" But I saw the way my father looked at her. It was the look of a man who had been betrayed, but said nothing, because he still loved the son who had brought this woman into their lives. Sunday morning, I made a decision. It was time to end everything. I walked into the house like I'd never left, opened the kitchen door. Megan jumped, hard, spilled her coffee all over the counter. What are you doing home?" she stammered. "I thought you weren't back until Monday night." I looked her dead in the eyes. "Yeah, the trip ended early, just in time for me to see who you really are." Then I pulled out my phone, hit play. The clip started, her standing at my father's bedside, arms crossed, venom in her voice. "I count the days until you stop breathing. I want this room. I want you gone." Megan just stood there, face pale, hands trembling. For nearly 10 seconds, she didn't say a word. Then she broke, tears, screaming, running up the stairs like a child caught red-handed. I didn't move. I didn't touch the cold coffee on the table. I just sat there, each second dragged like a lifetime. No yelling, no slamming fists. My silence was louder than any explosion. It was the funeral bell for this marriage. Half an hour later, she came back down, eyes red, hair messy. That look she used to wear when she'd say, "I'll always be by your side." Gone. She started talking, performing almost, like she was auditioning for forgiveness. "You misunderstood. I was under pressure. I don't know who recorded that. I cut her off. "Do you have anything else you want to say to my father? Say it now. You won't get another chance after today." She froze, mouth twitching, but nothing came out. And that's when I saw it. The woman I once called my wife? Gone. All that was left was a shell, a good actress, a mask of charm hiding a heart sharpened by cruelty. I set the envelope down in front of her. Inside, copies of the divorce papers, an itemized list of divided assets from my attorney, and a formal notice. She had 48 hours to leave. The house was in my name, paid for with inheritance from my mother. She knew that. That's when Megan exploded, screaming, crying, even slamming her fists on the table. "You're choosing that corpse over your wife? You're ruining my life." I didn't flinch, didn't raise my voice. I just looked her in the eye and said calmly, "No, you ruined it. I'm just cleaning up the wreckage." The next morning I called Arlene to come early. I didn't want my dad to hear a single sound of chaos. Megan slammed her bedroom door. She packed, clattered, shuffled around all morning. By noon she came downstairs, dragging her suitcase through the living room. She stopped, stared at me. "You'll regret this. No one will ever love you like I did." I didn't nod, didn't shake my head, didn't say a word. She walked to the door, and just as she reached for the handle, I said, without looking at her, "You're right. But no one has ever made my father cry like you did either." The door shut behind her, and silence settled over the house. From the next room, my father sat in quiet stillness. Then, softly, he called out, "She's gone, isn't she?" I walked in, knelt beside his bed. He reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. And for the first time in years, he called me my son. Not out of habit, but with the full weight of a father's love. The kind that hurts when it stays quiet too long. You did the right thing, he whispered. Sometimes a home isn't where you grow up. It's where you can finally rest in peace. We left the old house that Tuesday morning. The air was crisp, but the sun was soft, as if the sky knew we needed comfort. I drove the old pickup, Dad riding shotgun. In the back, our old cat Samson curled up in his carrier, oddly calm, as if even he understood we were doing the right thing. The new place wasn't big, no yard, no front porch, but it was ground floor with a window that looked out onto a row of little trees. Within days, I'd already hung the wooden birdhouse Dad made back when I was in high school. One of the last pieces left from the days when he could still climb ladders without help. Dad still got turned around sometimes. He'd forget where the bathroom was. Every now and then he'd ask, "Where's Megan?" if I came home late. But the tears were gone. So was that hollow look in his eyes, the long sighs when I left his room. Gone. Instead, he started telling stories. Stories about Mom. About his first day working at the lumber mill. About the time I got lost at the county fair when I was 5. And how he found me just by listening for the sound of my cry in a sea of strangers. I'd sit beside him like a little boy again, listening. And for the first time, truly understanding that this strong, quiet man had loved me his whole life through every unspoken gesture and every silent sacrifice. Arlene kept showing up, faithful as ever, taking care of Dad with the same gentle hands and soft voice he'd grown to trust. Lorraine, our old neighbor, dropped by once a week, bringing his favorite cinnamon waffles. And me? After all these years, I finally felt peace inside a house that was truly mine. No one had to tell me to choose between love and loyalty. Because here's the truth. If someone claims to love you but can't respect the person who raised you, that's not love. That's possession, dressed up as devotion. 3 weeks later, my attorney called. Megan had signed the settlement. No court, no drama, no need to release the footage. She chose to keep her pride. I chose to keep my peace. A few days after that, as I was making breakfast, Dad looked up from the table and said, "You know, this place may be small, but it feels like a nest. Warm. Enough. That's all a man really needs." I turned to him, his silver hair catching the soft morning light, his eyes cloudy but steady, and his voice still strong, still sure. "You kept your promise to your mother," he added. "You didn't leave me. You didn't abandon the one who needed you most." I stood there, silent, letting those words settle into my chest. That night, I cracked open the window, let in the cool breeze. The old cat climbed up on the sill, tail twitching, gazing out at the stars like he remembered something we didn't. And in that moment, it hit me. Peace doesn't come from where you are. It comes from who you're with. I closed the window. Heart light, no bitterness, no noise. Just this. The end of a story that was never perfect, but kind enough to call family. Because a man can lose a lot in this life. Money, marriage, even friends. But if he still has his father and a little kindness left in his heart, he's got something no one can take. A home worth coming back to. If this story made you pause, even for a second, to think about your dad, your home, or the quiet strength of kindness, leave a comment below. Because somewhere out there, someone might need a gentle reminder that real family is where you are never left behind. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, support the channel by subscribing and sharing. You never know. You might be the reason someone else finds their way back to hope. Thank you, truly, for listening.